Hey, it's Firewalker, and I am so excited to finally be getting to do this video that I've been wanting to do for a couple of weeks now on the moral law argument for the existence of God. And this is something that I definitely did learn in school, along with the teleological argument and the cosmological argument for God's existence. Although, with those two, we did learn some of the flip side to it. We learned how to debate some of the usual arguments that conflict with it, I guess. But we never learned that about the moral law argument. We were just taught it as if it were the truth, and we went on non questioning it. So this is something new to me. This is a totally new outlook that I'm really excited about. And plus, I've also noticed that the moral law argument has been coming up more and more frequently than I really expected it would. So I haven't heard anything about it until recently, since high school, like sophomore year or something, or maybe even eighth grade. A long time. But it came up on Christianity, Reason, and Science's channel. It came up in an email that one of my viewers forwarded me from a street preacher, and he's asked that both their names remain anonymous. And it's also come up in some comment debates under videos that I've been watching recently. So I thought this would be an excellent time to go ahead and look at this from a more reasonable standpoint. Here to start us off, we have a short explanation of the moral law argument from Christianity, Reason, and Science's video, Apologetics Made Easy, the moral law argument. As always, you can find the link to the full video in the description, and we're just going to take a look at a clip here just as the basis of it to get us started.
The moral law argument, which can be simplified to say that since we all have a moral law within us, some call it conscience, which helps us to know right from wrong, since we have this moral law within us, someone must have put it there. There must be a moral lawgiver. The formal argument is laid out this way. Number one, every law has a lawgiver. Two, there is a moral law. And three, the conclusion, therefore there is a moral lawgiver.
Before we go any further, I think we should stop and talk about this moral law business. Because as far as law goes, when it comes to morality, it's more like...
Is more what you'd call guidelines than actual rules.
And here to help me with this point, we have the email from the street preacher who says what basically anybody would say, and everybody does say, about this topic when they're trying to prove it. They pick a couple of things that they think that everyone can agree on is clearly wrong, and that you would seem like a bad person if you were to disagree and say, well, no, not really, it's not exactly wrong. And so the two obvious examples he chooses here. And I quote, "For example, murder and rape is wrong no matter the circumstance, right?" Well, actually, no. And let me explain why. Okay? On the face value, murder is always wrong, right? It would seem like the obvious answer is yes, of course it is. But we have the usual exception of war. And then it gets even more complicated because we have the exception to the exception, which would be war crimes, which are so horrific that they still count as murder and wrong, even though it's in the time of war. Then we have self-defense. Then we have capital punishment or death penalty, which we actually see God use. So I don't know how that works. That makes it even more complicated. So you see all these exceptions and times where it gets kind of murky. And then if we want to go further into these exceptions, we could look at the Bible, especially since we're probably dealing with Christians with the moral law argument. And we can talk about killing people who don't believe in your religion, anybody who makes a sacrifice to another god, etc., etc., etc. The list of people to kill drags on and on and on. We also see an interesting phenomenon as far as the rape, where the examples of the contrary are not quite as obvious. I was reading a book like in the 5th grade about a missionary named Amy Carmichael. She's a missionary to India. This was back when I wanted to be a missionary to India myself, so it was a pretty good book. But anyways, it talks about how she would uh, disguise herself and sneak in to Hindu temples and save little girls from ceremonial rape, which was performed as a part of the Hindu religion at the time in that location. So they clearly didn't see rape as obviously wrong in every circumstance because there were some religious circumstances. We also see in some heavily Muslim countries in the Middle East where it is illegal / immoral to kill a virgin. So if a woman is indicted for something and she's a virgin, they can't just kill her, obviously. So they rape her first, then they can kill her because she's no longer a virgin. And for whatever reason, this makes sense to them morally. I mean, whatever, however that works. So all of these things, it gets so gray, and the moral law argument presupposes moral absolutes that are absolutely true all the time, and it completely ignores the area of gray. It lives in a land of black and white that we simply don't live in here in reality. Another aspect of this supposed moral law that allegedly comes from a non-changing God, and also any idea about moral absolutes, is the difference in how much it changes over time. I would think that a God who doesn't change, if he were to instill these absolutes, these laws in us, we would not see it evolve and change like we have. And you can't say that we haven't. The idea of humane execution in human history is relatively recent, and the lengths we go to for that. We have different ethics in how we marry, who we marry, how many we marry at the same time, etc. It's changing. And if you look even, 50 years back, and it's when you're going to hear grandparents say, well, when I was a kid, when they were kids, you couldn't see a husband and wife in the same bed together on TV. They would still have separate beds because they would not portray anything suggesting an actual sexual relationship. And that idea is almost laughable now, considering all the stuff that we have on TV now. We're clearly not afraid of that anymore, because that was viewed as immoral, that was viewed as wrong, and now it's just not. And the idea of same-sex marriage being immoral and wrong is clearly changing as well, slowly but surely. The ideas of what governments can and cannot do have changed over time. You name it, it's there. So this law is evolving and changing just like human society is evolving and changing, it is therefore then more like society than an unchanging God, which might suggest its origins. And speaking of origins,
now, have you ever been a part of a conversation where people were discussing what's important in life? If you have, you may have heard people saying things like being good, doing good things, or helping others. And these are all good answers, aren't they? For most people know instinctively that we should be good, do good, and help others. But where did we get this notion to be good and to do good? We got it from the moral law within our heart.
I'm sure it has nothing to do with the fact that when you do good, you can also expect some good, and that person may then owe you a favor. And it's how we manage to build a society with this idea of treating other people well so we can all live in harmony, not kill each other, because it's more beneficial for us to be in a group than it is for us to be all alone. I'm sure that could have nothing to do with it. And for that matter, it's also interesting how the morals change geographically as the societies change and through time, etc., which suggests to me that it doesn't actually originate from an unchanging God, but from society itself. And these are the rules, these are the guidelines that we ourselves have come up with in order to govern our society and keep things peaceable. That is where morality comes from. That's why it keeps changing. Morality is whatever society as a group decides that it is, and how it wants to govern and rule itself. And I also find it interesting that Christians will use the moral law argument. Oh, we already have a moral law in us. We already know what's right and wrong ourselves. Therefore, there must be a God. But at the same time, say that we are so inherently immoral and sinful that we need God to save us. And some people even make the argument that you can't be moral without God. And by some people, I mean many people. In fact, the street preacher makes a similar argument in his email to one of my viewers, where his first paragraph is about moral law and how there must be a God because murder and rape is always wrong no matter the circumstance, etc. And in the last paragraph, he makes the argument that you need God because when he was without God, he was immoral and doing all this bad stuff and that sort of thing. So you need God to make you a better person and to bring you up out of sin.
I'm the one who gripped you tight and raised you from perdition.
So I have to ask, which the fuck one is it? Are we so moral that it suggests that there is in fact a moral law and moral absolutes and therefore there must be a moral law giver? Or are we so depraved and immoral that we need God to save us? Because you can't keep making both arguments. You can't have it both ways. You're just going to have to choose one.
When you see these images here of Adolf Hitler, the swastika, and the rubble remains from the Nazi war machine in World War II, what's your immediate impression? Do you think that Hitler was good or bad? You would likely say he was bad. How about when you see the images here of Mother Teresa, who helped so many of the poor and suffering in India? Would you say that she was good or bad? You'd probably say she was good. And if you were to take a survey of 100 people, they would likely agree with you and say that Hitler was bad and Mother Teresa was good. And yet, as hard as it is to believe, not everyone would agree. There would still be some that would say that, Hitler was good and Mother Teresa was bad. So, was Hitler good or was he bad? We have different opinions here, don't we? Well, without an objective standard, no one can really say that Hitler was good or bad, because it would be nothing more than their own personal opinion.
And here we see the presupposition of moral absolutes, because then it would be just a matter of opinion. Okay, and you're going to have to give me more than that. So what? So it's a matter of opinion. Who cares? It doesn't make a difference whether it's a matter of opinion or an objective standard. And as far as a matter of opinion, how can we say what's good or bad? Well, we as society have decided that killing millions upon millions of people because they're trying to cleanse the human race somehow based on misguided religion and Christianity is bad. As is torturing people. We've also decided that's bad. Because we, as a society, says this does not benefit society. And it's cruel. And therefore, we decide that it is bad. We don't need anybody to tell us that it's bad. We have decided that it's bad.
Let me explain further. Here we have two gray lines. Which of the two is the straight line? Neither, you say? How do you know that? You know that because you know what a straight line looks like. The point is, we can't know something is crooked unless we know it is straight. The red line here is straight. And how do we know that? By comparing the line alongside a straight ruler. The ruler is an objective standard that we can look to when determining if a line is crooked or straight. Comparing the gray lines on the left with the ruler, we know that the gray lines are crooked. Now, you may be saying to yourself about now, that's great and all about the lines, but what do crooked and straight lines have to do with the moral law? Good question.
One, no, I was not thinking that. And also, was this video made for 4-year-olds? Two, interestingly enough, the ruler was also created by man. So we can create objective standards by which to compare other things to. Interesting. And here's where I was going to show the rest of the video from Christianity, Reason, and Science, but honestly the rest of the video is kind of irrelevant to the argument itself. But if you want to continue watching it, you can follow the link in the description, be my guest, let me know what you find, let me know what you think. And to conclude this discussion on the moral law and the idea of moral absolutes, I have a couple of questions. Is it ever okay to purposely drown an innocent kitten? Is it okay or morally upright, just, to drown an innocent kitten because you're mad at the people the kitten lives with? No. We would usually say no. But the flood is somehow moral? Is it moral to kill people just because they don't believe in your religion? We would typically like to say no. And yet, the Bible? Anybody? So these people who believe in absolute moral laws, I have to ask you, are there absolute morals and therefore your God is unjust? Or do you have a God and there's no absolute morals? Because the absolutes he's given you, he's breaking. So which is it? Because you can't have both. Just like you can't have both, we are so moral, there must be a moral lawgiver, and so immoral, we need God to save us because we can't possibly act moral on our own. And one more thing before we leave is that religion apparently does not affect how moral we are, a study finds, linked in the description below. So all these wrapped together is, I cannot possibly believe in the moral law argument because it makes no sense on so many levels. And that's what I have to say about the moral law argument. This is Firewalker. Absolutely, please let me know what you think down below. What are some instances where you've heard someone give the moral law argument, or you've given the moral law argument, and what are your thoughts about that? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, rate, share, yada yada, etc., because it makes my day. Honestly, makes me really happy. So I look forward to seeing what you guys have to say and in the videos to come within this next week. Thanks for joining. Thanks for sharing this with me. I really appreciate it. Bye, guys.